What's up, guys? Welcome back to Timeout Predictions. Today we're going to be discussing my stats and my predictions for the 2025 Super Bowl featuring the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles. So, let's get into it. Let's start by saying this. Commanders played horrifically in the NFC Championship versus the Eagles. And I think a lot of people are thinking right now that the Eagles are going to play that way in the Super Bowl. I think that it's going to be very hard for them to be consistent enough to play that way in the Super Bowl, especially with Patrick Mahomes on the other side. And I know you guys are thinking this. Eagles have the number one defensive rating right now. And Super Bowl quarterbacks are 3-11 all time against number one defenses in the Super Bowl. This is not the same quarterback as all those other guys. This is Patrick freaking Mahomes. And you can never bet on him or count him out in any situation. You can't bet against him. And so I think, first off, that the Eagles are going to have a really hard time containing Mahomes whenever he gets outside the pocket. I know they have fast guys at the corner position like Quinyon Mitchell, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, who even though he's 36 years old, still plays at a very good level. He may not be as fast as he used to be, but he still plays at a very intense competitive level. And so I think what they're going to have to look for are plays to the boundary and plays where Mahomes gets his legs moving and he's able to pick up short yardage first downs. Now, on the flip side, the thing that's going to define the game the most is going to be the offensive line of the Eagles versus the defensive line of the Kansas City Chiefs. Because when you think about who they have on the offensive line, I didn't even realize they had Mekhi Becton until the divisional round against the Rams. I didn't even realize Mekhi Becton was no longer on the Jets. But they have Mekhi Becton, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, I forget who their center is, but they have all these guys up front that are. They're saying right now that the Chiefs have the best offensive line. I would argue that the Eagles have the best offensive line and one of the best defensive lines. The only reason why I wouldn't say the best is because they play in a 4-3. And so they're not usually sending two DNs and two DTs. They're usually going with a nose tackle, two DN set, and then they're sending outside linebackers like Nolan Smith, like Nakobe Dean, even though I know he's injured right now. So they're doing a lot of pressures from delayed blitzes, a lot of simulated pressures up front. And I think what Kansas City, their defensive line has to do is they have to set the tone at the beginning of the game and get stops on first downs. That's gonna be crucial to get stops on first downs. Eagles run the ball second most to the Ravens this year in the league. They run way more plays on the ground than they do passing. They only average about 27 pass attempts per game, and they're only averaging, out of those 27 pass attempts, about 17 completions. And so their bread and butter is Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts running the ball. And Jalen Hurts, for all the touchdowns he has, his rushing statistics by average are not that great. There were games this year where he had 14 attempts for 40 yards and one touchdown. For a running back, that's horrible. For a quarterback, that's also really bad. So, regardless of all of those games, if the Chiefs are able to force him to make bad decisions, get pressure up front, get pressure around the center, maybe even go with some of those simulated pressure packages, get guys coming in off the end, like I know they use Nick Bolton sometimes. They often switch up their D lines. Chiefs is a very versatile D line. I don't think there's any one player outside of George Karlaftis that you could point to and say, well, this one is going to be the impact player of the game. I don't think you could do that because Chris Jones only has 5 sacks on the year. And there's no other player outside of, I believe, Tershawn Wharton, and George Karlaftis, who has more than 6. And that's still very good that those three guys have at least 5, but it just shows you how versatile their defensive line is. They have Derek Nottie, Charles Omenihu, who never gets credit. You never hear about Charles Omenihu. Um, you have guys. You have guys in the linebacker position. Leo Chenal, Drew Tranquil. Both of those guys tend to play. I believe Drew Tranquil is more of a Mike. Leo Chenal is more of a weak side linebacker. But either way, they tend to disguise their defense, and I think that's one of the biggest credits of this Chiefs team, is that a lot of the teams that they've played discredit their defense because so much of the media and offensive perception, it always falls on Mahomes and it always falls on Kelsey. And now that they don't have Tyreek Hill and they haven't had him for a few years, all eyes tend to go just to those two. They don't even think about the wide receivers that the Chiefs have. And strictly on defense, I don't think what gets enough credit is the versatility of their secondary. They have guys like Chamari Connor, Justin Watson. I believe they actually have 2 guys, which is funny, named Justin Watson on the Chiefs. One's a tight end, third tight end, and then one is a corner. Those guys have played tremendously. Chamari Connor specifically, he stepped up in a big way throughout the season, had 1 crucial interception. I believe he had 4 passes defended and only 3 starts. I can't be certain on that, so don't quote me on that. But the Chiefs' defense has been playing baller as of late. And it's important that we recognize that the Chiefs' defense versus the Eagles' offense, that's going to be this ball game in a nutshell. I think less is going to be said on the offensive side for Kansas City, because I do think they're going to be efficient enough to get the job done. I don't think Kareem Hunt is nearly the running back as Saquon. Obviously you can look at the stats: 2,000 yards, almost. I think he might be close to 2,500 at this point, maybe at 2,500 for the entire season, which is, I know y'all are seeing the shirt I'm wearing. That's a big disappointment for me as a Giants fan, but nonetheless, this again speaks to the Eagles' offensive line. And so, I think the Chiefs, going back to the Chiefs' offense, with Kareem Hunt, with Isaiah Pacheco, with Patrick Mahomes, with the rotation of wide receivers. I know people are saying these guys are washed, but DeAndre Hopkins and Juju Smith-Schuster have still shown that they can make big plays down the stretch, especially DeAndre Hopkins. I was there. I'm here at App State now. I was at the Carolina Panthers Chiefs game, and I saw DeAndre Hopkins playing very well, playing at a very high level, scoring a touchdown, I believe in the third quarter of the game, and he is a player that is still very physical, still can run tremendous routes, and I think even in his, going back to the Houston Texans days, he was never a guy that you could just consistently cover one-on-one. You know, he's always going to win a matchup. He's not a guy that you just consistently lock down for the entire game. And part of the reason why I think people aren't talking about him as much is, again, going back to the versatility of the Chiefs' offense. They have so many guys that they rotate in and out. I mean, you think about the tight end position alone, people are giving so much credit to Travis Kelce. Some of the bread and butter of the Chiefs' offense this year has been getting the ball to Noah Gray in the low or in the kind of medium red zone. Or what they'll do is they'll run, I guess it's called flood, to the right. And then this was the third play of the game in the Panthers game. They had Noah Gray kind of leak across the field to the left side, wide open. Safety didn't cover him. Mike Jackson didn't come down to cover him. And it's a 25-yard touchdown. So some of their bread and butter has really gone to guys that often go unnoticed because the figureheads of their offense are Patrick Mahomes and they are Travis Kelce. And when we think about it like that, you guys have to understand that this Chiefs team, this Chiefs offense, they've been there. This Eagles defense, Eagles haven't been rebuilding, but they've been consistently revamping. And so a lot of the guys that were on that Super Bowl from 2 years ago, there's not the same amount of players that were there that are here this year. For example, Quinyon Mitchell is a rookie. Um, N'Kobe Dean, Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, all these guys are new. I believe, yeah, and even going to, gosh darn, I forget their safety position. Let me look at the stats really quick. Yeah. So their safety, I apologize, guys. I don't know the Eagles roster as well as I should have, but Reed Blankenship. Reed Blankenship. He's a young guy. Then you think of Cooper DeJean, who they often play at on special teams on kickoff return, also a rookie. Then you have guys like O'Shawn Burks, never played in a Super Bowl before, even though he's been in the league. You have guys, and I'm just going through their roster. Milton Williams, I don't believe he was in the league at that time. And so, point being is that the defense of the Eagles, despite them being number one overall, outside of CJ, Darius Slay, and um, James Bradbury, and of course some other backups, I guess you would say, Avonte Maddox, Sidney Brown. Outside of those guys, there's really no one in their linebacker or edge rusher position packages that has any experience playing in a Super Bowl. And so this is going to be crucial because I think the experience of Patrick Mahomes and the offensive scheme of the Chiefs is going to be able to exploit a lot of the the cover two, the cover three that the Eagles tend to play in. I think they're also going to be able to, whenever the run isn't working, because inevitably this Eagles D line is going to get stops on Kareem Hunt, inevitably. And Kareem Hunt, despite the productivity he has had for the Chiefs, he's on his way out of the league. He is no longer one of these up and coming guys. He's no longer in his rookie year where everybody was thinking he was going to be the next face of the league. He is on his way out of the league. And so I know that the Eagles' D line is going to be able to get stops on him, whether that's through simulated pressures or just standard blitzes. But whenever that's not working, Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to exploit this Eagles defense. And it goes back to, again, just the fundamentals and the lack of experience that a lot of these guys have playing in the Super Bowl. And I could be wrong. Because they play a very mature style of defense. You don't see them making a lot of mistakes. They were top 5 in the league in takeaways. Ironically, the other team in Pennsylvania was tied for the most with the Steelers, but Eagles were still top 5 in takeaways. I believe they were also top 5 in sacks, which is incredibly impressive. But regardless, we've seen this Patrick Mahomes-led team. We've seen them in tough situations. We've seen them against good teams when they're down and out. And regardless of whether or not you think the refs play a part in that, you cannot bet on Pet against Mahomes in the Super Bowl. But Mahomes lost a Super Bowl. Mahomes lost a Super Bowl to Tom Brady. And so it's like, the one that he does lose, you're going to call him out for that. It's like you can't bet against Patrick Mahomes now, but you couldn't bet against Brady for the longest time ever. And so that Super Bowl, I don't think you can hold against Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs team regardless of how the game turned out. However, since that year, since the next year, whenever inevitably in that offseason, I believe it was the 2021 offseason, that Tyreek Hill left and went to the Dolphins, Chiefs haven't lost a Super Bowl since then. I don't think they're going to lose this game. I really do not think they're going to lose this game. I think they are going to be able to move the ball down the field. I think they're going to be able to run a lot of stick plays to Travis Kelce, a lot of the plays that you see where he just catches the ball really in that flat position, spins around a guy, and is able to break free for about 16, 20 yards. And we've seen this time and time again, and it's beginning to make me think of Travis Kelce as almost a one-trick pony. I know that's not the case, but they run the ball with the stick play so many times to him that you would think that that's the only route he's capable of running. Regardless, though, there's been little success at stopping that, and whenever they do stop, or they send a linebacker to press him, and then they have a safety kind of eyeing him. Whenever they do that, they're leaving someone open in the middle of the field, especially if the Chiefs run someone like Worthy down the sideline, which takes away another guy, and then they have their guy in the slot. Maybe it's Marquise Brown running through the center of the field, and he just sits on the ball. Mahomes is going to be able to make that play every time, because if they come down on Kelce, he can hit Brown. If they go to Brown, he can sling it to Kelce. If that doesn't happen, then guess what? He's got either a check down in Kareem Hunt somewhere on the field, or, as we've seen time and time again, he breaks out of the pocket and he scrambles for 6-7 yards, and sometimes, a lot of times, it goes for a first down. And so I don't think that, first off, let me start by saying I think the Eagles will be able to account for that. I think the Eagles are game planning for that. But we have to keep in mind, again, the experience and the scheme that the Chiefs play is meant to break a defensive down. And also, one of the crucial stats of this game, and both of these teams, I believe, are top 10 in this category. Time of possession. Chiefs are top 5 in time of possession. I think they average almost 33 or 34 minutes a game time of possession. That wears the defensive down like hell. Defenses are not able to keep up with that, and that's why they were so effective. Maybe not so much in the Bills game, but in the Texans game, definitely. They just wore down that defense consistently. And when you get into those plays where the Chiefs are up, they're up 7, they're up 10, Andy Reid, my dad always likes to say that he gets conservative. And while he does do that whenever they're in a position to win, it makes it, they get the nickname Cardiac Chiefs, they do find a way to just wear down that defensive line. They run the ball relentlessly whenever they're in a position where they're up. They're not one of these teams like the Eagles and the Ravens where they run it all the time, because they know what type of quarterback Patrick Mahomes is. And they know that he has deep ball capabilities while also be able to spread it out and get guys into the flat and into these whole slot positions. And so that is just initial takeaway of this game. And I'm going to give you guys more in just a few minutes. Alright guys, I'm back, and we're going to be continuing to discuss my stats for the Super Bowl. So, in case y'all haven't already clicked on the link in the bio of my Instagram of Timeout Predictions, I'm doing a weekly prediction tracker for the entire season, for every single regular season game and every single preseason game, playoff game, playoff game, postseason game, too many P's, but printed out all of my stats for the Super Bowl. So I want to start by saying I'm walking you through my quarter-by-quarter score prediction for the Super Bowl. So first quarter, I think it's going to get off to a slow start. We've seen this in the Super Bowl before, regardless of the teams. Obviously, with the Patriots, I think the most notable of that would be 2018 when they played the Rams, and it was 0-0 for the longest time. I think this first quarter is going to go similar to that. I do think the Chiefs are going to be up at the end of the first quarter. I think they're going to be up 3-0. I think this will be a very low scoring first quarter. Neither of these teams are good at scoring points within the first quarter, especially the Eagles. I saw a statistic, I believe in week 14 of this year, that until they played the Panthers, the Eagles had not scored a touchdown in the first quarter of any game, postseason or regular season, since 2022 against the Arizona Cardinals. That's bad. That's ridiculous. That's almost 2 years worth of not scoring a touchdown in the first quarter. But they were able to score against the Panthers, but they've been consistently a bad scoring team in the first quarter. Chiefs up 3-0 into the first. All right, so now it's second quarter. You're on to the main course if you haven't eaten already at this point in the Super Bowl. Second quarter, it's going to shift. I think the end of the second quarter, we're going to see a tie ball game at 13 points. I think it's going to be 13-10 Eagles in the second quarter. I have a prediction that the Eagles are going to miss an extra point, and that's going to be pretty critical for them later on in the game. But I think the Eagles, I think Jake Elliott, I think it's just going to be a simple miss. I don't even think it's going to be a block. I do have a prediction that the Eagles are going to miss an extra point, and that's why it's going to be 13-13 instead of 14-13 Eagles going into halftime. I'm going to break down to you who I think scores the touchdown and in what order in a minute, but we're just going by points right now. Third quarter. Again, neither of these teams consistently have been high third quarter scorers. The Chiefs have been on the up and up. Obviously, in the playoffs, they tend to score more points in the second half, which is why they haven't lost a postseason game since 2021. But I think it's, again, going to be a slow one. Not as slow as the first quarter, though. I think each team scores a touchdown. And so, into the third quarter sees the points be 7-7 for the quarter. On the game, I believe it's going to be 20-20 at that point. So, very close game. If you look at the stats and you actually inspect them, regardless of the difference in offensive scheme and the amount of plays they call per game, these two teams are actually very oddly similar in terms of time of possession, yards per game, in terms of when they score, how much they score. So these are all things, how much they score, that's really kind of been amplified by the Chiefs' success in this latter part of the season. Obviously, earlier in the year, there were several games where they won 19-17. That was kind of their foundational win. 19 points. Get to 19, and they win. Which is obviously, again, in the regular season, why they lost to the Bills. They got around that threshold, got 3 touchdowns, 21 points. They couldn't keep pace with the Bills, and they also couldn't get enough stops. But we've since seen the team completely revamped and just restructure so that they're consistently scoring more points. And so it's going to be a very close game at the end of the third quarter. Going into the fourth quarter, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I think this is where we're going to see some turnovers. I think we're going to see a turnover by the Eagles and subsequently by the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to be lucky to make it out of here with a win. I already told you in the last segment, that I do think the Chiefs get the win, but I think they make it very hard on themselves in this fourth quarter. I think they outscore the Eagles 13-10, so the inverse of what happens in the second quarter. But I think they make it hard on themselves in the sense that I think Mahomes has a turnover. I think they become, again, like I've said about Andy Reid and my dad has said about Andy Reid, conservative play calling. I think they get in a position where they're up just a little bit. They feel overly confident that they can get the win, and then they start to slow down. They start to pump the brakes on where their offense is. I think this leads to punting from their own 40 sometimes. I think maybe in one out of the probably 3 possessions that they're going to get in this fourth quarter, they're going to punt at some point in this fourth quarter. I don't think this Eagles defense is that inefficient that they're not going to make the Chiefs punt at least once in this fourth quarter, especially knowing what's on the line and how many young players they have that are able to be quick to undercut balls, get interceptions, get sacks, and just consistently create havoc for Patrick Mahomes. I do think Mahomes is going to be defining this game, but you're also going to see moments like you have throughout the season where the Chiefs' offensive line and Mahomes have their blunders. But it's not so much about the blunders themselves as it is how this Chiefs team responds to that. And we've seen time in, time out, they respond pretty fucking well, which is why they're on the verge of a three-peat. And so, fourth quarter, I think the Chiefs outscore the Eagles 13-10. I think the final for the game, Chiefs win the ball game, 63 total points on the game, so I don't know who's betting on the under, but they have it right now. Last time I saw it was 48.5 points in the total game. I think it goes way over. I think both of these offenses are too good to be held to less than 50 total points in the game. I do have it at 63, with the Chiefs winning 33-30. That's a less common score than the usual 34-31. And I think this goes back to the fact that the Eagles are going to miss an extra point, giving them 30. I also think the Chiefs are going to fail. No, I apologize. I actually have this wrong. The Chiefs are going to miss an extra point, and the Eagles are going to fail at a 2-point conversion. Why will the Eagles fail at a 2-point conversion? I think the Eagles, especially Nick Sirianni's play calling, lends them to be a little bit ballsy sometimes, to a point where it actually hinders them, because they get so ballsy and they think they've got all this momentum that they put themselves in a position where they actually screw themselves later on in the game. And we saw this a lot in the 2022 Eagles, where they would try to go for 2 points. Obviously, in the win, unfortunately against my Giants, my G-Men, they were about to go for 2 whenever we gave up a penalty at the 1-yard line, and he was quick to go down there and have the team ready to line up for 2. So I think it's going to be a similar situation, but I don't think they're going to convert on this 2-point conversion. So, again, that leaves us with 63 total points. Chiefs 33, Eagles 30. Total touchdowns for the game, 4-4 split. I think each team is going to score 4 touchdowns. All right? So that's how you get 27 total points off of touchdowns for each team, because each team is going to have a missed type of PAT. Passing touchdowns, I think there's going to be 5, and I think this is why I say Mahomes will be a controller of the game. We haven't seen many games this year where Mahomes has 3 or more touchdowns. I don't even know, I can't be quoted on this, but Mahomes has not had 4 touchdowns passing in a game this year. I do think he gets 3 today, and I think his arm is what is ultimately the Chiefs' bread and butter this game. I think he gets a touchdown, 3 different players. I think he gets one to Kelsey. I just think it's going to happen this game, specifically the Super Bowl, not even from a rigged Chiefs perspective, simply because I think their connection is so dynamic that it lends themselves to a lot of success in the low red zone, especially on these option plays, especially on plays where Kelsey kind of leaks out into the flat, maybe even into the flat of the end zone. I think it's going to be dynamic enough to where they're getting a touchdown in that low red zone. I also think they get touchdowns to Noah Gray. I think he has one. And Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he also has one. And so, like I said, again, going back to the offense and the Chiefs' versatility, they are so dynamic in what they are able to do and the amount of players they're able to sub out. So, I do think Juju Smith-Schuster gets a touchdown. I think he's limited. I think he gets kind of locked up against Quinyon. But I do believe that Juju Smith-Schuster is able to get a few good catches, have some impact plays, and, again, not going back to the refs, but in the 2022 matchup against the Eagles in the Super Bowl, the penalty, the holding penalty against Bradbury, was on Juju Smith-Schuster. So I'm not foreshadowing, I'm not insinuating, but I will say they are going to try to get Juju Smith-Schuster, knowing that, in the red zone. I think they're also going to run one of their plays. They've NFL's gone in and talked to Andy Reid about this play. Someone's gone in and they've discussed it, and he calls it hot dog. That's his little. That's his little. That's the hurry up offense term for that play, and it's basically just a. It's a play to the boundary where they get one of their quick wide receivers out fast, and they kind of shift everybody. It's almost like counter, but for a pass play, because they're shifting everyone on the offensive line one direction and sending guys to that direction while also flooding it. Mahomes is flushing the ball out to his right side and getting a guy open again in that flat position, and it's an easy touchdown, walk-in touchdown. I think they do that. I think they capitalize on that type of play again with Noah Gray this time. For the Eagles, this is going to again go back to Jalen Hurts. It's become so prevalent that the Eagles like to run the ball that it actually has hurt their passing game. There was a point this season where the Eagles hadn't had over 250 yards passing, which you think at least they're getting 220. 220 for a Jalen Hurts-led team with guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, who they have not utilized nearly to the ability. I know he was injured part of the year. But when you have those types of guys, those types of receivers, even Saquon, they love to throw it to him out of the backfield. When he was on the Giants threw it to him out of the backfield all the time. So when you have guys like that are able to catch and get big yardage situations, make big plays down the field after the catch, you should be throwing, I would say, the equal amount as you run the ball. Because I think this speaks to the Chiefs' defensive line, but I think the potentially issue in this game is that they run the ball and rely excessively on Saquon. And I know Saquon's young. I know he's only in his 7th year. But we've seen running backs start to fizzle out after a while. Saquon is nowhere near fizzling out, but at the same time, you have to wonder, will getting 28 carries a game wear on him? All right, guys, so we're back discussing my stats for the Super Bowl. Just finished off yesterday talking about how the Chiefs can attempt to stop Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts in terms of the Eagles' running game. We already talked about the quarter-by-quarter score predictions and even the total points for the game, as well as the total touchdowns. So, I printed off a lot of stats. We even talked about the amount of total plays. Now, we have not yet talked about some rushing stats, some key rushing stats. Beyond the fact that I do think the Eagles will try to give supplemental carries to Will Shipley, I do think that they will give him at least one carry, because after what he broke in the NFC Championship, where he broke, I believe, a 70-yarder, I do think that the Eagles will attempt to supplement Will Shipley at some point throughout the game to add a touch of unpredictability in their run game. And they also really want to see what he can do in terms of assisting Saquon Barkley down the stretch. They want to see if he gets only one carry is my prediction, but they want to see if that is a productive carry. Can he get a first down out of it? Let's say we're in a 2nd and 7 situation, right? And Eagles are at the 42-yard line of the Chiefs. 7 yards through first down. They do a little outside zone play to Will Shipley. He breaks it for 20. Let's say he breaks it for 20. That's the equivalent of 2 first downs, considered a big play, right? Because any big play in the NFL or explosive play is considered a run of over 10 yards or a pass play of over 20 yards. So I think the Eagles are going to utilize Will Shipley in the sense that they give him supplemental carries, at least one, just to test where he's at. And if they find that he can be productive in those downs where Saquon gets a rest, then I think you'll see Saquon's carries decrease from my predicted amount, which was 24, to maybe even around 20. Because, and this is what I was saying yesterday, I think at some point you have to question how many carries can Saquon take in the Super Bowl. We know that he's consistently seeing 26, 27, 28, 32 carries a game. And that's why you see Saquon with 2,000, almost 2,200 yards at the end of the regular season. Because he was averaging like almost 200 a game, but it's because the Eagles ran the ball second most in the league to the Baltimore Ravens. Don't quote me on that, I may have that flip-flopped, but the Eagles were one of the top rushing teams in the league. And most of those carries, I would predict almost 90% of those carries go to Saquon Barkley. The rest are going to Jalen Hurts, and then occasionally, some trick play with Dallas Goedert on a tush push, or supplemental carry to Kenneth Gainwell or Will Shipley. But Kenneth Gainwell, I don't think is a productive back for them. I think that they utilize him more in a special teams role, in more of a receiving back role. I think Will Shipley is who they're looking for in the next guy up in terms of giving actual carries to a back that they can trust has the ability to be productive behind a dominant Saquon in a very consistently dominant offensive line. I saw a stat yesterday that said that the Eagles are the only, they may not be the only, but they are the heaviest offensive line in the league. Not a single player on the offensive line is shorter than 6 feet, and they are not less than 300 pounds. I believe only the center is less than 315, and that is Cam Jurgens, and he's still 303 pounds and 6'3". And so these guys that the Eagles have up front, from Mekhi Becton, Lane Johnson on the right side, to Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata on the left side, they are able to run these dynamic run schemes throughout the game, and only so much credit has been given to them in terms of Saquon Barkley's success, as well as Jalen Hurts' success, not only in tush push, but in any type of gap scheme where they utilize the quarterback's legs. And so, when I look at the rushing game of the Eagles and the potential to break big plays, it comes down to the offensive line. And it also comes down to who they feed. And they've consistently fed Saquon. But, going back to my starting point, I do expect them to give carries to Will Shipley, especially after what they saw him do in the NFC Championship. And this goes back to what I said, the fundamental and the aspect of the game that was going to define the entire game. It wasn't going to be the Chiefs' offense versus the Eagles' defense. I think it's going to be the inverse. I think it's going to be the Eagles' offense versus the Chiefs' defense. And how does the Chiefs' defense respond to the battering ram that is the Eagles' offensive line? We know that the Chiefs' defensive line is good. And I mentioned earlier that the Chiefs' defensive line, really the whole season, but especially in the postseason, we've seen them shift a ton of guys in. Normally it's Karlaftis, Jones, Warfton, and I believe not Mike Dana, Derek Nottie. But in the playoffs, we've seen them shift guys around. They bring in guys like Mike Dana. They bring in guys whenever Tershawn Warfton goes out. They bring in They bring in Charles Omenihu, who never gets enough credit. And he's one of those long-term Chiefs that have been there for a while, and Spagnuolo has utilized in substitutions and pressure packages. That's what I'm trying to say. those guys, those 6 guys that the Chiefs utilize on their defensive line, obviously they're going to have key substitutions throughout the game. And I would almost predict that some of these substitutions will lead to penalties by the defense. Chiefs aren't very high in terms of overall penalties, but when the Eagles get into a hurry-up offense and they're just pounding the rock with Saquon, or they pound the rock and then they switch it back, they do power or counter with the quarterback, it becomes very unpredictable in terms of how you stop them and what setup you go with. Because even if, and I know I've seen this in Eagles offensive like film, even if they send pressure packages, the Eagles can run this kind of triple option look where they fake it to Saquon, Hurts keeps the ball. If they run stuff, they can flip it inside on a slant to maybe Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, or send it down the field on a long ball again to Smith or A.J. Brown, or they hit somebody, maybe Saquon goes A-gap and just hooks around in the hole, and they hit him on a check down. So it's a very unpredictable offensive scheme, and I think that mentally the Chiefs tomorrow are going to have to be ready to attack this type of unpredictability. And obviously it goes back to the entire defense, who they sub out at corner. I know that they've had some injuries at corner. That's why we've seen Shamari Connor, Justin Watson playing. Justin Reed was injured just briefly in the Houston Texans game. So a veteran safety that they've had for a while. He's a leader on their defense. So it's going to come down to how does Spagnuolo account for the quickness, the mental toughness of Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, and how does he get that so that every single guy on his defense, because we don't want to have, if you're the Chiefs defense, you never want to have, or any defense, but especially in this type of offensive scheme that the Eagles run, if you are missing assignments, if you are playing too far off in coverage, let's say they go into cover 3 look, but at first they line up and it's looking like man, and then they drop guys off in the defense, they go with a press bail. The Eagles will account for that, and they're going to throw it to the underneath. If they don't throw it to the underneath, they're going to find someone in space, and someone's going to break it deep if the corner comes down. So all of these things, Spagnuolo, in his incredible defensive mind, has to be able to account for that, and it really will be the crucial defining point of the game. How do corners and how does the defensive line respond to the rushing attack? How do corners and safeties on the Chiefs defense respond to the threat of the running ball, as well as ridiculous passing concepts that I don't think the Eagles utilize enough, right? Because we talked about yesterday, I've even got it pulled up right here. I predicted that the Eagles will only run 23 passing games in the entire game. Passing plays. The Eagles average on the season for passing plays 27. League-wise, that's one of the lowest totals in the league. And it goes back to how dominant they are up front and running the ball. Now, when we think about how the Chiefs can stop this, okay, there was a very popular video that I saw a few weeks ago, and it was when the Chiefs played the Browns in Week 15. Chiefs played the Browns in Week 15. They were on the road. No. Yes, it was Week 15. Chiefs played the Browns in Week 15. They're on the road, and the play was an interception, I believe by Trent McDuffie. But what they did is he had a rotating scheme that kind of really confused the quarterback, because at first it kind of looks like a cover 1 scheme. The way they have is like one high safety and then they've got two corners just down from him in kind of a triangular look in the middle of the field. As the ball is snapped, these guys automatically shift and rotate to pick up. The corners spread out and go in space, almost like a V. They flush out to cover these guys in a 2-by-2 formation on the in breaking routes. The other guy, the safety, drops back deep. And so whenever the Browns think that they have an open middle of the field, and I believe it was DTR that threw the ball, they send somebody on the outside on an inside breaking post. Corner that's covering him from, I believe, some type of press technique comes down and he covers the backside of him. Safety's able to drop and pick him up. The other corners flush out wide enough so that every guy that they think was going to be open is covered. And so it looks like they're going to have a shot at the middle of the field. But the quarterback didn't account for the fact that the safety was already dropping because they went with a shifting look. And so whenever they do that, and whenever Spagnuolo, again, with his incredible defensive mind, comes up with these types of these schemes, these passing defensive schemes, it becomes hard to read by a quarterback. And also, it makes route alignment very difficult because once the route is already being run, the quarterback only has so much time to throw it. And that's where you're likely, as a defensive player, to get a turnover, to get a sack, because there's two situations. If they rotate that same type of scheme, and let's say the Eagles have someone doing the exact same thing. They have a skinny post come to the inside, middle of the end zone, right in front of the post, right in front of the goal post, that is. If the Chiefs run that same type of scheme, that same type of bluff coverage scheme, then it becomes very hard for Jalen Hurts to see that. And the best option in that scenario is that the Eagles account for that. They have some type of mesh underneath, or at least a check down. At worst, it's a pick or it's a coverage sack. And because we've seen this time and time again, though, and this is why it really will come down to Eagles offense, Chiefs defense. We know Jalen Hurts is able to get out of the pocket and just throw the ball away. I saw it multiple times in the NFC Championship against Washington. But in that type of scenario, and this goes back to the Rams game, there were coverage sacks. One by Jared Verse, and I believe one by Brandon Fisk, because the defense presented itself in a way where it looks, at first, pre-snap that they're going to have somebody open. But as the ball is snapped and as they're rotating guys out, it becomes obvious that the defense has everybody accounted for, and it becomes a coverage sack because the defensive line is able to get past their blockers. Even the very talented Pro Bowling 300-pound offensive linemen for the Eagles, they're able to do their job and force a sack. And so I think that is a very key aspect of the Chiefs winning the game and also winning the line of scrimmage on defense. So it's going to come down to defense versus offense. Again, Chiefs defense, Eagles offense. That is my take on that. Now, some other stats, going back to rushing. I think there's going to be a total of the 8 touchdowns scored. I do believe that 3 of them, I believe that there will be 3 total. 2 by the Eagles, 1 by the Chiefs. And I do have a little bit of flexibility with the Chiefs because I've seen this in anyone who's followed the Chiefs for the past 5-6 years should know this, that in the playoffs, Mahomes finds his way into the end zone whenever his guys are covered. We've seen it so many times where he's 15, where he's 10, 15, 20 yards out. He breaks it outside and he's pumping. He's pumping the ball. trying to find somebody. He's holding it in like this weird thing. I know that you've seen it where he's standing. He's got the ball in his outside right hand, and he's just holding on to it single hand. And then he breaks, and it confuses the defense because they're anticipating that he's going to throw it. And I think this is one of the big adjustments that defenses have made in terms of covering Mahomes and accounting for the Chiefs' unpredictability. Is they know where their guys are. And we saw a mistake in the Texans game with the Kelce touchdown. Guys ran up on Mahomes because they knew that he was a run threat at that point. Because where he's sitting on the hash outside of the pocket's over here, O-line's over here, and the guys, the corners and the linebacker start running towards him. All that did was leave an open gap in the middle of the end zone where the safety wasn't close enough to make a play on the ball. Easy throw, lobs it to Kelce in the end zone. It's a touchdown. A dude dove for it. Al-Shaair dove for it. But it's still a touchdown. It was too late. And so these are the types of adjustments that the Eagles are going to have to make. But it again goes back to, and I know we're talking about rushing, Mahomes is unpredictable, and in the playoffs, especially in the Super Bowl, he's shown that he can get outside the pocket or go up through the pocket and make big plays with his legs. And so I do only think the Chiefs get one rushing touchdown, but I think if they're in a position where they're about to score and they're about 15 yards out, I predict that it will be a rushing touchdown by Patrick Mahomes because of how we've seen him play and because how he breaks out. If they get it somewhere inside the 5, ISO, inside zone, touchdown to Kareem Hunt is my prediction. I do not think that we're going to see Kareem Hunt, especially with the defensive line and the linebackers, in this base 4-3 defense that the Eagles play in. I do not think Kareem Hunt is going to have a carry greater than 12 yards in this game. I could be wrong. For the sake of my dad, who's been a Chiefs fan since 1991, I do hope that I'm wrong. But I really don't think that Kareem Hunt is going to have a huge average against the Eagles. On the offensive side of the ball, on the Eagles, I think we go one apiece for the Eagles' top 2 rushers. I think, obviously, one to Saquon. Next obvious, quarterback. Tush-push, Jalen Hurts. This is an easy prediction for me to make because... Alright guys, I am back. The reason why the Eagles will score 2 touchdowns, one with Saquon and one with Jalen Hurts, is again going back to the offensive run scheme that they are so dynamic about. Alright? We've already talked about their offensive line being great. The 300-pounders, the 6-footers they have up front, how they utilize multiple run schemes to get their offense flowing. And so I believe that Saquon, again, is going to break a 25-yard touchdown, 20 or 25 yards. I do think that it's going to come down to how the Chiefs' back 7 defenders respond to these dynamic types of plays and this dynamic style that the Eagles have up front. Okay, we know that they like to run these types of GT counter schemes. They also run power with the quarterback. Obviously, tush-push inside the low red zone or when they're trying to get a first down. We've also seen iterations of this where they run the ball with Dallas Goedert, the tight end. They put Dallas Goedert in a quarterback position, in a quarterback area where he's under center and he takes the direct snap. So there's a lot of flexibility within this Eagles offense. I don't think that the Eagles go with Dallas Goedert in a run play at all this game. But again, it just comes down to the fact that I think the Eagles, despite the success that the Chiefs will eventually be able to have on defense, I do think and I trust that Saquon, with the season he's having, with the dynamic nature of his versatility, shiftability, whatever you want to call it, whenever you're playing against substituted back 7 defenders guys like Chamari Conner, who I know Chamari Conner has become a kind of staple at the corner position for the Chiefs, but still, he doesn't have that much experience. And so, what it's going to boil down to in terms of stopping long run plays and preventing medium gains from turning into extremely long gains, how do back seven defenders tackle in space? Because Saquon's jumped backwards over someone. Saquon is one of the leaders in missed tackles forced this year. And it's just so difficult because of the power that he possesses in his legs to get this guy down. You're not gonna get Saquon down with an ankle tackle. Like, that's just not gonna happen. If you're diving at his ankles, it's too late. If it comes down to Chiefs corners and safeties, whenever they're trying to get him down, and he's running along the hash and shifting closer to the boundary, if they get to a point where they can't keep up and they're diving at his ankles, it will be a touchdown every single time. We saw that. The biggest example of that, I believe, is in the 2 games against the Los Angeles Rams this year. Saquon alone in those 2 games went for almost 600 yards rushing against the Rams. Out of his total 2,500 something yards, 600, almost 600 went against the Rams. That's almost 20% of all of his total rushing yards went against the Rams. That's a little off topic, but that's insane. And that again speaks to the fact that he's able to bounce these inside plays, these inside zones, these ISOs, these little just inside gap runs, bounce them outside, get outside the tackle, break free and get outside the box, get to the second level, and then once he hits that hole where he's breaking on the boundary and he's cutting to the outside, one, that would require corner to drop off and chase him, and then it's also going to require both safeties, or if they're in cover one, safety's going to have to attack that. And we've seen time and time again where that's just not the same. It's just not a method for stopping Saquon Barkley. Efficiently, that is not a way to stop Saquon Barkley. And so that's how I think Saquon's going to score. I think Jalen Hurts scores in a more predictable way. We've seen them do this. I think that he scores in a tush push or in an RPO type of scheme. Again, low red zone, kind of where I think Kareem Hunt, if he scores, will score in that low red zone. Anywhere from 7 to 5 yards. Anywhere from 7 to 1 yards out, really, is where I would anticipate that. Moving forward, and we've already talked about total plays, I think it's going to be very similar. Eagles typically have about 62 plays per game, which is actually really low in the league. Chiefs are actually 62 in a game. Eagles are just on their average a little bit below that. They're about 59.6, 59.7 plays per game, which we'll round up and say 60. So I think that the Chiefs are going to maintain time of possession, as we've seen them do again and again. And this is where they're going to wear on the Eagles' defensive line, as I've already mentioned. Pound the rock whenever they're up, and they may even get a little conservative. Pound the rock when they're up, and just wear down that offensive line. I again alluded to the fact that I don't think Kareem Hunt is going to have a huge, crazy average this game. But it's not about the yards always, as it is the amount of carries that you're giving your guy. That shows that you trust your running backs, and not only that, but you trust your offensive line to block and to move this thing down the forward. Because it's not just the offense, it's the entire team symbolized by the offense. And so, I do think the Chiefs will have slightly higher total plays, 58 to 54 in favor of the Chiefs. And again, it's going to come down to time of possession. Both of these teams are top 10 in the league in time of possession. But I think the Chiefs have more experience in these situations, big games, Super Bowls, consistently. and they're going to set the tone, and they're going to be the reason why they're going to have a greater time of possession in comparison with Philadelphia. On the other side, receiving touchdowns. We've already mentioned rushing touchdowns. As for receiving touchdowns, and a lot of people aren't going to necessarily agree with what I said about Travis Kelce and the dynamic connection he has with Mahomes. You can argue that, but you're probably going to end up arguing with a wall because that's just how it is. Mahomes and Kelce are one of the most dynamic playoff duos we've seen in a long time. And I do predict a score connection between them. The next player on the Chiefs roster that I strongly anticipate will get a touchdown, number 2 tight end, number 84, Noah Gray. And I predict that he will do that because I was watching the Panthers-Chiefs game in Carolina live. And the third play of the game, it was a third down, and the Chiefs ran a flood concept to the right side of the field. And every single player, back 7 defender, took the bait. Safeties, corners, the 2 linebackers that they had in space bought that all 4 of these guys, because even the running back, I believe Kareem Hunt, ran in front of Mahomes and went out on the boundary. Went out on a little arrow route. So everybody, 4 out of the 5 guys running routes, went to the right. Noah Gray was doing a little chip flat thing initially, but that chip flat turned into a chip wheel. So he was chipping the in man on the line of scrimmage, going against that defensive end to help out the tackle. Help out the tackle. And then he delayed his release, snaps out into this wheel route, and he's running along the left hash. No one around him. Mahomes hits him, and it's a 25-yard touchdown. And so we've seen these types of concepts with other tight ends in the Chiefs' offensive scheme. And I think that's one of the things that you can give a lot of credit to Andy Reid for. I know Kelce's been in the league longer. He has way more touchdowns than Noah Gray and Justin Watson. But I think the way the Chiefs utilize their tight ends now speaks to the versatility and the changing in the offense. Because I don't think you could point to any 3 of those guys and say that they're the most dominant at every route concept, right? Because Kelce's the most dominant at stick concepts and shallow crossers, and also just getting into the flat, getting on an option route, and either continuing to sit on the ball and then make his move after he already has the completion, or breaking it outside, or breaking it inside. But he's always running something where he's in Mahomes' vision. Think about it like that. He's always running something where Mahomes can find him. And so they designed a lot of plays like that. And they also have a lot of plays where Noah Gray is more of a deep ball tight end. You know, a lot of people think of him as only a blocking tight end. I would argue that's more Kelce and even Justin Watson that does blocking. But with Noah Gray, he's more of that deep ball tight end that they utilize to get out in space, get to the boundary, or we've seen it time again, break down the seam and cut it inside and score a touchdown in the middle of the field over the defender's head. So either one of those options is very much a possibility of how Noah Gray scores in the Super Bowl. The third player that I have scoring a touchdown for the Kansas City Chiefs, and a lot of people will probably disagree with me on this, but in 2022, when there was a holding penalty on James Bradbury against Juju Smith-Schuster, very questionable call. But Juju Smith-Schuster and Kadarius Toney were 2 of the, I believe, 3 wide receivers that scored touchdowns for the Chiefs. I again have Juju Smith-Schuster scoring a touchdown. And I think they're going to run what I've seen in a video called Hot Dog by Andy Reid. That's just the hurry-up offense name for the play. but it's basically where they get the wide receiver on the outside boundary. He kind of just rolls out. They flip it to him. He rolls out. He flips it to him. He turns his shoulders back to the quarterback, and they throw him the ball. Everybody else is either in the backfield in kind of not a jumbo set, but they have guys. They typically go 2 tight ends, so I think they go 12 personnel. 2 tight ends, some guy on the left running just basically a distraction route. Running back fakes the inside, and then they flip it to Juju on the outside, and it creates confusion for the defense because they're anticipating a run play, and the tight ends are blocking, and the 2 guys on the outside, they're anticipating, I guess, opposite fades. So just fading to the corner of the end zone, hoping to make that play on the ball. I truly think that this is where they're going to see a lot of options with Juju Smith-Schuster, and for that reason, he's going to have a touchdown. Speaking of wide receivers and sticking in that same vein of thought, if you look over at the Eagles, I have 2 guys that are going to score a touchdown for them. I think they're only going to have 2 passing touchdowns of their 4, because I've already mentioned that one of Jalen Hurts' 3 total touchdowns will be a rushing touchdown. The 2 guys that I have scoring touchdowns receiving for the Eagles, A.J. Brown, Jahan Dotson. And everybody's like, whoa, why would you predict that? A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, right? I say Jahan Dotson because they have not utilized Jahan Dotson well. He only has about 450 yards total on the season, and that's with around 60, 70 targets. I don't know. I can't remember the exact target amount, but still, they've not utilized him well, and that's why I think it's going to lend itself to him getting a touchdown, because I think there's going to be a play where it's set up by a big catch down the field, as we saw in the first Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl, where corner lost his man, safety had to come down, and A.J. Brown scored a massive touchdown, I believe on the first drive of the game for the Eagles. I think it's going to be similar to that, except A.J. doesn't score directly. It's a big play, and then you get some kind of slant, some kind of on the back line of the end zone play. I think it's going to be about 11 or 12 yards out, but I do believe that Jahan Dotson is going to be the guy in the slot, breaking in, and they're going to flip it to him and find him, and Jalen Hurts is going to have a touchdown with him. I already mentioned this other guy, A.J. Brown, setting up to play for the Jahan Dotson touchdown. A.J. Brown, I don't typically bet, but if I did bet, I would almost guarantee A.J. Brown will get a touchdown, especially if he finds himself in a one-on-one matchup on the outside with a backup corner for the Chiefs. Specifically, I know Shamari Connor has stepped up, and we've mentioned his name a lot throughout today's episode. But if he's in one-on-one coverage with Shamari Connor, as a bigger receiver, as a fast player for his size, he's going to be able to make a play on the ball, and Jalen Hurts, he's one of the very most accurate quarterbacks. He can put the ball in positions where only his guys can go and get it. And I think that you're going to see that in both of these passing touchdowns, specifically along the boundary if it goes to A.J. Brown. Moving forward, we're actually going to flip it from offense to special teams. And so we're going to come back to offense in a minute, but we'll point out scoring on special teams. I think there's going to be 3 total field goals in the game. Harrison Butker with 2, Jake Elliott with 1. And I believe that's going to be the difference in the game. I believe that the Harrison Butker second field goal is going to be the reason why the Chiefs ultimately do win this game and three-peat. Moving forward from there, I believe there's going to be 8 extra point attempts and 7 extra point makes. I put on my little stat sheet right here that that's 100%. That is not 100%. That's 83%. But I think that the Chiefs are at some point going to miss an extra point. I think that one of the big kind of under talked about storylines about this game is that special teams for the Chiefs versus the Eagles has been really sort of a mismatch. I put the Eagles in terms of rating way higher than the Chiefs, and I think it speaks to the special teams coordinator of the Eagles, but it's just the guys that they utilize. They utilize Reed Blankenship. They utilize a guy who played kick returner as well as corner in college in Cooper DeJean. They utilize him at the kick return position. And in terms of kicking, I know you guys see that I'm wearing a Giants hat right now, and I still remember in 2017 when Jake Elliott nailed a 63-yarder to win the game in Week 3 against the Giants. And so Jake Elliott, really behind Justin Tucker, regardless of what's going on with him, Jake Elliott is one of the premier kickers in this league. I think Harrison Butker for the Chiefs has been a franchise kicker for the team, but in terms of where the league is at right now, I don't think that he's really in that top 5 of kickers anymore. I do think that he's going to miss an extra point. It's not going to be something that gets blocked. It's just going to be a kicking blunder by the foot of Harrison Butker. In the same kind of vein, we have 2-point conversions. I think there's only going to be one 2-point conversion in the entire game. And I do believe that the Eagles will again, they're going to see something open up when they get that touchdown to Jahan Dotson. I think it's going to be on that same drive that the Eagles try to go for 2. I've already alluded to this some, but the Eagles with Nick Sirianni, even with Doug Peterson, at some point they just got aggressive with going for 2. I don't know what the mentality is, but Nick Sirianni seems to have carried on that Doug Peterson-esque type. Go for 2 when we're up, just as a test. You know, they want to test the defense, but they also want to test their own ability and their own success rate at getting into the end zone for 2. And an example of this, I know that there have been this season, but a specific example, and again, it goes back to me being a Giants fan.